Hey, so check this out. Two of my favorite open source projects in the world right now have come together for a built-in integration that you can use right now out of the box, and that's NATS and Project Sveltos. If you're not familiar with either one of them, I've done videos on both. I'll link some in the description of this video, but they're both really, really cool projects and highly suggest you take a look at them, get to know them, see what they can do. So for this, I'm going to be going over that integration and how you can use event-driven workflows using NATS to manage resources in your Kubernetes clusters using Project Sveltos. Here's the documentation. It's going to cover everything about how Sveltos integrates with NATS and Jetstream. Jetstream is the durable stream where data is stored and cached for however long it needs to be before it's retrieved, right? So Sveltos integrates with both for production-ready workloads. It's pretty awesome. So this covers all of the things that you need to do to get set up, how you configure it, right? If you want to know more about Jetstream, there is plenty of documentation on the NATS website, but everything that I'm going to do in this video is also on GitHub in this repo. There's a full, robust README that explains how I set up my environment locally. You can check that out. It's got all the Kubernetes configs that you need to get up and running to reproduce this demo on your own, right? All runs in a kind cluster, so you can do it locally. Cool. All right. What are we doing today? Well, let's check out my architecture. I've got, as I mentioned, a kind cluster running on my machine. In that Kubernetes cluster, I've got a few things deployed. I've got NATS, I've got Sveltos, I've got a Python app. We'll talk about that in a second. And I've got Argo CD installed. Now you might have NATS, you might have Sveltos running in remote clusters, managing things remotely. Either way, this integration will all work the same way, whether or not you've got everything in one cluster or a management cluster managing things separately. As long as NATS and Sveltos can talk to each other, this is all going to work. So over there, we've got GitHub. We're going to do some stuff with the GitHub API. But first, I want to mention that I've got NATS exposed locally using the Cloud Service Provider plugin for Kind, right? If you're not familiar with that, I'll link it in the description. So that's exposing NATS so that I can interact with it using my Mac's command line. Awesome. From there, we've got me looking like a total winner over here, and I'm going to issue commands, issue events from the command line to NATS, and then those events are going to fan out. Sveltos is going to take that event, and my Python script is going to take that event, my Python app, okay? The Python app is going to interpret the data in that event, and it's going to create a repo in GitHub for me. And then Sveltos, knowing that, hey, we just created a repo, let's create an Argo CD application and go full GitOps on this thing. Automation, everybody wins. So let's check out how this works, right? First, where are we deploying these, where are we building these repos? We're building it in this kind of demo org that I built a while ago. This is not real. Please don't look this up and expect it to do anything. This is just for demo purposes. I used this in my KubeCon talk last year, and I've been using it ever since anytime I need to interact with the GitHub API. So I'm going to build out a repo in here. We've got two now. I'm going to build out a third one. Okay. And the way I'm going to do this, if we come into VS Code over here, all right. So first I've got my NATS configuration that matches what we saw in the documentation here, right? This is how I'm configuring Sveltos to work with NATS. Very cool. And then I've got an event source set up for Project Sveltos. Remember, that's a custom resource that Sveltos creates. That's going to track CloudEvents with a source attribute of repo.codesalot.com, not a real website. Anyway, CloudEvents source. Let's talk about what that means. Right? Sveltos uses a cloud event specification when it's interpreting events from NATS or from any other thing that uses event-driven architecture. Okay, so if we come back here, CloudEvents, if you're not familiar with it, it's a specification under the CNCF umbrella. CloudEvents is actually a graduated project, and it's implemented pretty widely across the CNCF landscape. You can see if we scroll down, a lot of projects are using CloudEvents. Now, there's a whole specification to it, and that's all documented on GitHub. If we come in here, we could see table of contents for the specification. This is the latest version, which is apparently work in progress, but everything I'm going to show you still applies. So if we come down to context attributes, these are the attributes that have to be in every event in order for it to be compliant with the specification. So we scroll down, we can see there's different types. And here, this is where we get to the required attributes. you have an ID, you have a source, and we already talked about the CloudEvents source that I'm sending these events from is repo.codesalot.com, not a real website. And then we have spec version. So this is the CloudEvents spec, right? Pretty much must use a value of 1.0, says it right there. And then type. We're going to talk about type in a second, but there's also optional attributes. And the big one that we have to include, there's data content type. We're going to send JSON. There's data schema. The big one that we're going to include is subject. This is an optional attribute, but it's required for the Sveltos integration. When we say subject, a little bit of background here. NATS has a stream setup called subject. CloudEvents has an attribute called subject. They are not the same thing. This is an unfortunate aspect of the English language and the wide applicability of the word subject. In NATS, you can think of subject the same way you would think of a topic in Kafka. So the general subject of conversation, right? Whereas in CloudEvents, this is more of the grammatical subject that receives the verb in a sentence structure, right? So the subject here is always going to be a noun. Well, I guess they're both nouns. English, it's hard. Anyway, this is important. We're going to see this used throughout this demo. And if we come back into VS Code, okay, we had CloudEvents source, now my event trigger that I'm using in Sveltos here. It's using this repo requested source. That was the one we were just looking at, repo requested, right? We know that this is pulling from any events that have a CloudEvent source of repo.codesalot.com. Very cool. Move back to event trigger, and we can see some information here. If the CloudEvent type required attribute is repo.requested, we will take a create action and we will create whatever stuff is in this config map down here. Well, let's look at that config map. It's an Argo CD application, exactly what I said when I was walking through the architecture, right? So this is an Argo CD application. And here, we're already seeing this for the first time. CloudEvent.subject. This is the subject, that optional attribute, but we're going to name this application off of the subject, right? And this right here, this annotation, we're putting Project Sveltos IO/subject CloudEvent subject. Sveltos keeps track of things based on the subject that is being applied. Now, down here, we can see some other stuff. We're going to point to the GitHub org. We're going to point to the repo. It's going to be great. Let's see what that looks like when I send this event. Okay, so here it is. I've got a bash script that's just going to send an event off to NATS. Remember, I've exposed NATS with a load balancer service type using the Cloud Service Provider plugin for kind. That was a lot to say, but it's all there, I promise. So I'm going to push this event right here, and you can see here are my 4 required attributes. Here's my subject attribute, data content type, and here's my actual payload, right? So I'm sending this event to Kubernetes through to NATS in my Kubernetes cluster saying, all right, create a repo called this repo, created in the OpenGarlic org. Pretty straightforward. And it's subject OpenGarlic this repo. That makes sense. So let's take a look at what happens. I'm going to come into my Z shell. The first thing I'm going to do is prove to you that I've got nothing up my sleeve. Argo CD app list, right? I'm configured against my kind cluster. There's nothing there. Let's solve that problem. So I'm going to sh. Well, yes, there is a failure event, but right now we're going to just focus on the success event. I'm going to hit that, repo requested. So that event just went through NATS. It fanned out between my Python application that interacts with the GitHub API and Sveltos. So now let's find out what happens when I app list now. Boom, there it is. There's an application in my Argo CD installation, and it's the OpenGarlic/thisrepo.git. All right. Did my Python app do what it's supposed to and create this repo? Let's find out. Here we are. We refresh. Boom, shakalaka. Three repos, right? This repo, that's the one I just built out. Okay, great. I've got working event-driven resource management in Kubernetes, event-driven repo management in GitHub. That's cool. What if it goes wrong? So let's take a look at my architecture again. Here I am still looking like a total winner. And next, we want to see what happens when I try to create a repo in the Microsoft org, which I do not have access to. Like that is definitely going to get rejected, right? So I push an event to NATS. It's going to get fanned out. Sveltos is going to create that application in Argo CD at the same time that my Python app is going to try and create a repo in the Microsoft org. Well, GitHub is not going to like that. So let's find out what happens. Let's see. Let's go beyond the happy path and see what we can do. Come back over here and we will pop back into VS Code. Look at this failure event. Yeah, this is it, right? I'm creating that repo in the Microsoft org. I promise this won't go well, right? So I'm going to have a bifurcated state. GitHub will say no, and Argo CD will say, well, yeah, that's what's supposed to be there. So what do? Okay, sending off this cloud event. It matches the spec. I've got my 4 required, and I've got a new subject. Cool. Well, I will sh scripts failure event. Remember, I've got this one Argo CD application. So I hit failure event. What's going to happen? All right. Failure event was sent. Now, if I Argo CD app list, do I have 2 applications? 2 applications. I've got my Microsoft that repo and my OpenGarlic this repo. That's bad, right? Because if I come back, I mean, realistically, I don't actually have to check into Microsoft. I can just promise you it's definitely not there. So what do we want to happen here? Well, what we want to happen is for this Python app to send an error event up to NATS. Sveltos is going to receive that error event and delete the Argo app. Is that possible? Well, let's come back and see if that happened. App list, sure enough, there's only one. Here, I'll bring it back up to the top. App list, there's only one. OpenGarlic this repo. Why? Because if I come back into my event trigger, we saw this part, right? If cloud event type is repo requested, we'll create it. I have this conditional, I have this other path on this conditional here, this else if cloud event type is repo error, delete it. And how does Sveltos know what to delete based on the information coming through? It keeps track of the subject in that cloud event specification, right? So when it created this repo using this, when it created this application in Argo CD using this subject, okay, the error type event, the repo.error cloud event type came through with the same subject. So Sveltos was able to match that and say, we got to delete the corresponding resource. That's how that works. This is super powerful, right? Because as this shows, you can get event-driven cluster management that also works with your application layer, right? So it's doing the Sveltos stuff up on the control plane, but it's also doing application stuff in the data plane. You can completely mix and match and have everything be event-driven. I'm going to go pretty nuts with this in a future video to show just how far you can take event-driven resource management in Sveltos with this NATS integration. But for now, that's it for today. If you like this video, please consider dropping a like. If you want to see more videos like it, please consider subscribing. And if you want to see content that I'm not covering, please consider dropping a comment. I do take suggestions. I am a little bit backlogged, but I'll get there. I promise. Everyone who has suggested a video will get their video. Thanks for watching.